Hey, Vincy. Your sister decided it was 8 o'clock and she needed to text me, so I was having to answer her. Hi, Audrey. You can't be talking to me on there if you're texting me. There's a storm coming through, ladies. The sky got really black out there. Now it looks like it's calming back down, so I don't know. I might be getting a storm, might not be. I don't know. Is this day over with yet? I'm tired. I am tuckered out. Tuckered out. Hey, Vincy, I have 6 or 7 new nuggets out the barn. Yeehaw! Oh, I'm the crazy shaman, I guess. Yeah, sorry, I got your message. Did you get mine? Where I reply back to you? It's my time of the month. Snappy today. Snappy. Dang, the veins on this guy. I just want to put IVs in him all over. Hiya! How are ya? Miss Gothic Moms. Whoop whoop. Yay! Ronnie can kiss my ass, Ori. Yay! The author is in the house. Cate is in the house. Speaking of being in the house, where has Jackie been lately? Yay! All righty. Y'all about ready? One more minute, then we'll get started. Miss Cate, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with chapter 3 and read 3, 4, and 5 if I have time. But I know for sure I want to read 3 and 4. Is that okay with you? Because I feel like if I read the beginning, the before, it's not going to be enough to hook. I feel like I need to start at modern day and read then. So I hope that was okay with you. Because I've had this book for a while. I want to say I won it. Is this the book I won? I've had 1 or 2 of your books for a while. But I want to say I won it during a takeover or party or something. Okay. Thank you. All righty. So let's go ahead and get started, and people will keep trickling on in. Looks like I got 6 people on here tonight. Whoop, whoop, that's good. All right, ladies, and if there's any gents, this would be the cover. I don't know. Can you guys see the veins on him? See that line going across his arm? That's a vein. He's got them all up and down his chest. For an ex-EMT that had to put that did a IV in the back of an ambulance, those veins just make you want to go. Argh. So, all right. So I'm going to start chapter 3. And Vincy, get ready because there's a deep male voice, and then there's there's a Spanish voice that may turn out sounding like like some dude that was raised in a house with a Latin speaking, Indian speaking, and I don't mean Native American, but the Asian Indians, um, Irish speaking, and oh hell, let's just go ahead and throw some Russian in there too, because I at some point in time I know I sounded like a Russian too. So these are going to sound really, really interesting. But there's one character in here, Cate. I'm so in love with Tasha. Oh my gosh, I'm in love with Tasha and her sassy mouth. So I'm hoping I've got Tasha's down pretty good. So, all right, let's get this party on the road. Chapter 3, the end. Done. It's time to go home. Time to go home. All right, February 2012, 25 years later. The beginning of the book starts back in high school and something that happened back in high school that affects their relationship today. And just as a short, because I don't want to give too much away because you guys really need to read the book in order to see what all this is about. Jack and Caitlin were together in high school. Something happened. Caitlin got really hurt emotionally by Jack. And when you read that part, Jack was an asshole. So when they come back together 25 years later, she's giving him a cold shoulder. So I haven't got to Ashley yet, but Tasha, oh my, I can do Tasha. All right, February 2012, 25 years later, Jack Anthony Guard stood beside the body of a young African American girl as the coroner's assistant zipped the black bag. He sighed, feeling every one of his 42 years. This is going to be rough tonight, y'all. I'm so tired for some reason. It's just been an emotional roller coaster the past 4 to 5 days, 3 or 4 weeks. God, another one. She made number 5. In the past 18 months, the city of Newburgh had been littered with young African American girls' bodies, raped, tortured, mutilated, all dumped within blocks of each other. The area was comprised of several blocks in the thick of the ghetto known as the Flats and the Heights. The area before the buildings started to rise and fan out towards the bluff was the Flats. Anything after the main incline to the very tip of the bluff was the Heights, and after the bluff was the Hudson River. Emergency vehicles scattered across the area, some with their lights still flashing. A large group of onlookers were being held back by officers in yellow police tape, which cordoned off a large grid surrounding the body. Jack looked at the faces, trying to see if there were any repeats from the last body dump. Of course, in this neighborhood, that may not mean much, other than the fact that the person actually lived nearby. Being an ogler was not a crime. Jack noticed several news vans further on the opposite side of the street. The vultures had arrived. Terrific. Oh, thank you. These are my Dollar Tree glasses. All my good glasses are in yonder, and I have a whole tree of these in there. So yeah, I have all kinds. I have them to match most any outfit I wear, and always looking for more. Jack felt a tap on his shoulder. What the hell is the Sea of D's doing out here? Sarah Mint, formerly known as Sarah Dawson, his high school girlfriend, asked. Oh, whoops, wrong voice. Jack felt a tap on his shoulder. What the hell is the Sea of D's doing out here? Sarah Mint, formerly known as Sarah Dawson, his high school's girlfriend, asked. Great, he thought. Just what he needed. Feisty, award-winning journalist Sarah Sunshine Mint. Ignoring her question, Jack turned and made his way to his car a block away, parked off to the side. One of your pet rookies let you pass the line, Sarah? Jack was annoyed. Sarah kept pace with him. Come on, Jack. Can't you give me something? Her voice was sugary sweet. Forget it, Sarah. The coedish sweetness doesn't work on me. Jack opened the door of his unmarked car. Sarah shrugged. It used to. Jack paused, not getting in the car. He looked at Sarah. She was still beautiful, still golden blonde with bright blue eyes, sexy even in her tailored business jacket, skirt, and open black peacoat. But she didn't steer him and hadn't in a long time. Not anymore. That was high school. With that parting retort, Jack got in his car and sped away. He didn't need Sarah glorifying the lunatic in the Newburgh Times Record. She was an okay reporter, but she had a way of picking and choosing which details she used for articles. It grated on his nerves. It seemed all her stories had a slant designed to make him and his men look like Mayberry rejects. Biased Mayberry rejects. The aforementioned lunatic was terrorizing the black community. He had enough problems with the crime that had been running rampant on his watch. The very last thing he needed was another pat story from Sarah making him look like a bungling idiot. The city of Newburgh's crime was on the rise. It had been making national news repeatedly all over the last few years, from gangland shootings, gang initiation killings, robberies, drug wars, turf wars, on and on it went. Sarah's stories often made it seem as though the criminal element went unchecked, as if there was no police presence. And Jack knew that that wasn't true. He knew their stats. He ate, slept, and breathed their stats. Last year's officers handled 31,034 calls for service, which was the equivalent of more than one call for service for every resident of the city, as though the entire population had called. Officers additionally generated over 6,300 incident reports in that time, which resulted in 3,651 arrests. The department investigated 11 homicides, 7 rapes, 195 robberies, 310 aggravated assaults, 284 burglaries, 724 larcenies, and 66 auto thefts. And recent crimes had made the national news once again, creating the impression that the city of Newburgh was a hotbed of crime, some sort of Wild West in the East. The more heartbreaking of the crimes had been a little boy gone missing while in the care of his mother's boyfriend. The boy's body had been found in a duffel bag in a small field in the flats. The boyfriend was eventually charged and convicted. Then a mother of 4 drove herself and the kids into the Hudson River right off the Newburgh landing. All perished but the eldest child, who at the time had been the tender age of 10. And now some asshole was reducing the black female population in a most gruesome manner. Jack didn't know what the fuck was going on in his city, but he knew his men were doing their job and doing it damn well. He had been harsh with Sarah due to her last story, which implied the city of Newburgh hadn't taken a black woman's missing teen seriously, implying that if the teen had been white, the entire force and SWAT would have been called. Jack had been livid when he read that story, and even more so when Sarah had failed to report that the teen was found unharmed with her friends on an impromptu road trip. Well, enough was enough. He had a meeting in the morning with a special section of the FBI, a splintered group of the BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, known as the HCD or Hate Crimes Division. Jack pulled into the station's underground parking in the Tower building. He had several files that needed work and his signature. Then he could go home to bed and hopefully sleep. Sleep had evaded him since the murder started. They were disturbingly reminiscent of the crime which had changed his life forever back in 1988. Caitlin Light. The name whispered through his mind. Throughout the years, he had often thought of her. Questions whirled around in his head whenever he thought of her. Always the same questions. How was she? Has she ever recovered from the horrible thing that had happened to her? Where has she gone when she left Newburgh so abruptly, almost immediately after being discharged from the hospital? Was she still shy? Was she still gorgeous? Was she still sweet and sexy? Did she still taste so good? Did she still hate him? At the last question, Jack felt a bone deep weariness take hold of him. He opened his office, turned on the light, smiling when he saw post-its with terse instructions on neat stacks of paper. Tasha, this would be Nina. Sign these and for your approval, and your dinner is in the fridge. Eat it. Jack tossed that one in the garbage and then broke out laughing as there was another one directly under it, which read, "What'd I say?" Thank God for Tasha. She had been a godsend when she had shown up looking for work 12 years ago. Jack admitted his life had become a wreck. Tasha had come breezily into his office stating he needed her in the worst way. Remembering her from his time with Caitlin, he couldn't resist hiring her after she more than proved her qualifications for the job. Jack shied away from one of the reasons he hired Tasha being a tenuous connection to Caitlin. Caitlin never looked up her old friend, Tasha. She would also find him. He knew it was crazy and he would never admit it to anyone. Pushing his wishful thinking aside, he quickly finished his work, obediently nuked the meal Tasha left for him, gulped it down, and left for home. He knew just from the day he would need some help falling asleep. He stopped at Mobile on the Run and bought a six-pack. Driving home, he prayed that from the FBI arriving tomorrow, it would be a better day. Whew. Caitlin Light stood over the bathroom sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She stared for several long minutes. Sometimes she saw the little girl that had been lost in 1988. Other times she saw exactly what she was, a 39-year-old, overworked and overtired civil servant. What do you think you're going to see by staring at yourself like that? Jose Sanchez asked from the doorway. Caitlin caught his eye in the mirror. Nothing. Well, you are staring like you see a ghost or something. He came into the bathroom and sat on the toilet lid. Getting antsy about returning home? Jose put quotes in the air with his fingers. Caitlin tilted her head considering Jose's question. No, not antsy. Then what? Caitlin knew Jose would annoy her until she gave him something real. His tenacity was part of what made him one damn fine lawman. I am just not looking forward to it, that's all. She turned away from the mirror and went into the room to lay down on the bed. Indicating the hotel's open connecting door, she said, "Is there a reason for this visit? Don't get..." There comes the British voice for it. "Hey, Teddy!" Don't get pissy with me. I came to offer you some of the pizza I ordered. I am not pissy. Jose sat on the end of the bed, his tone serious. Yes, you are. I am betting it has something to do with your hometown. In all the years I've known you, you have never visited. Why? I don't want any pizza, thanks. Her tone and look were dismissive. Jose nodded, getting off the bed and headed to the connecting door between the two rooms. See, pissy. Jose shut the door. Caitlin reached for the remote, knowing she would get no sleep tonight. Tomorrow she was meeting with one of her betrayers. In 25 years, there wasn't a day she hadn't thought of those who had destroyed her innocence. Tomorrow she would be meeting with the person whose betrayal had hurt her the most. Jack Anthony Guard, Chief of Detectives, City of Newburgh, New York. Tasha entered Jack's office carrying a steaming mug of coffee. Morning, Chief. Jack looked up from his computer. Morning. Did you eat breakfast? Tasha set the coffee down in front of him. Tasha, could you stop with the nagging wife routine? He sipped at the coffee. Perfect as always. Boy, if I was your wife, I'd kick your ass. My man wouldn't be at working 18-hour days. She smiled. I'd keep you too busy in bed. Since the first day they met, Tasha was able to make him blush, and still was only one of only two women who could make him blush. Stop. Go type something and send in the FBI guys as soon as they get here. After an hour later, Jack was going over the latest preliminary ME report on the young girl from last night. Her cause of death was like all the others, exsanguination. After raping and torturing the women, the animal had let them bleed out. They needed to capture this psycho before any more citizens were killed. He was about to go to the murder room where all the pertinent information was tagged on the case when his phone beeped. He pushed a button. Yeah, Tosh. Uh, Jack, the FBI is here. So, what are you waiting for? I told you to send them right in. But, Jack, Tosh, send them in. He disconnected, stood and put his suit jacket on. He straightened his tie as his office door opened. Tasha hurried over, blocking Jack's view of the agents that entered the room. Jack, I think you should excuse yourself for a minute and talk to me. Tosh, I don't have time. Bring in the case packets for the agents. But Jack, Tasha persisted, is there a problem? A male voice inquired. Jack moved around Tasha, offering his hand to the agent. No, of course not. My assistant was just going to get the updated case packets for you. Hi, Jack Guard, chief of detectives. My tongue is trying to go faster than my brain, y'all. Bear with me. The two men shook hands. Supervisory Special Agent Jose Sanchez, HCD. My partner, Supervisory Special Agent. Jack had been reaching his hand out when he looked into the eyes of Sanchez's partner. Caitlin? Green clashed with brown. Jack froze with his hand out, staring while some of his questions were answered. Yes, she was okay. Yes, she was still gorgeous. Seeing her cold eyes, yes, she still hated him. That's right, Caitlin. I wasn't aware you two knew each other. Agent Sanchez split a look between him and Caitlin. Jack waited to follow her lead. We don't, she said. I am Caitlin Light. Clearing his throat, he stretched out his hand again. Jack Guard. Caitlin looked at the hand he offered. Ignoring it, she dipped her head. Guard. The other woman who could make him blush just did. At a loss for a few seconds, he heard Tasha's voice. Please, right this way. We have everything all set up for you. Jack found himself once again thanking God for Tasha. Holy shit. Out of all the ways he had dreamed meeting Caitlin again, this didn't come close. This was in an alternative universe. Bringing up the rear, he followed Tasha and the agents into the murder room. Against a whiteboard, the victims' timelines were listed under each of their pictures. The agents went towards the board, both looking it over silently. Tasha came over to him, handing him a photo. Last night's victim. Slipping the photo out, tacking it into an empty column on the board, he took up a marker and quickly put in the information on the latest victim. The two agents watched as each item was added. When he was done, Jack placed the photo on the conference table. Both agents remained silent as they continued to study the board. While they looked at the board, Jack looked at Caitlin. God, she was beautiful. She was a couple inches taller. Her hair was no longer jet black, but a dark brown, streaked with a lighter brown feathered end, and flattering waves falling past her shoulders. It was what Tasha called salon magic. He didn't even pretend to understand what all women did in those salons, but he had to admit he loved the result. Her breasts were bigger and even sexier, if that was possible. A belt cinched her waist, and on it her weapon looked huge compared to her waist. Her badge glistened brightly in the front. A cell phone was clipped on the opposite side of her gun. With her hands on her hips, it accentuated her womanly curves and highlighted how small her waist was and how nicely curved her hips and ass were. There was something clipped to the back of her pants as well, but her jacket partially covered it. Jack assumed they were cuffs. Caitlin faced her partner, took off her jacket, and draped it across the chair. She gathered her thick hair, creating a tight ponytail with her hand. She put her back to the whiteboard, lining her face with the victim's pictures. Tilting her chin this way and that, she asked her partner, "What do you think?" "You were right again." Her partner smiled at her. "It's disgusting how you can pass for 20-something when you are almost 40. Horrified realization dawned on Jack. Hell no! He hadn't realized he'd spoken out loud, or rather growled aloud, until all pairs of eyes turned on him with varying degrees of shock. "Excuse me?" Agent Sanchez raised his brows. "That's right. Excuse you." Pointing to the door, he rapped out, "You too, Tosh." "Now, just a minute," Agent Sanchez began. Jack grabbed the other man's arm and forcibly led him to the door. Tasha had already left. "Hey, what do you think?" Jack slammed the door on the rest of Agent Sanchez's sentence. Locking the door, he heard Tasha say something to the offended agent. Jack didn't care what as long as he stayed out. "It's a federal offense to assault a federal agent, Chief Guard," Caitlin informed in a bored tone. Jack turned from the door and started towards her. He was brought up short when Caitlin's hand rested on her weapon and she took on a defensive stance. He then realized he had been rushing towards her. Taking a deep breath, he continued more slowly. She still kept her hand on the gun at her side. "Is there a problem, Chief Guard?" Caitlin asked with that "I've got better things to do than humor you" tone. "You're damn right there is if your solution to these murders is to set yourself up for bait. I assure you, I've done undercover work many times before." Caitlin's inflection implied she was indeed humoring him. She didn't have to justify anything to him. Tough, Jack thought. "I don't give a shit." Caitlin's eyebrows rose, disappearing under her bangs, but she remained silent, studying him from beneath her long lashes. Damn, she still did that. And it still turned him to jelly inside. Her silence underlined just how out of line his outburst was, making Jack angrier. Here he was, all tied up in knots, both physically and emotionally, from seeing her again, and she just stood there being indifferent. She hadn't even wanted her partner to know they knew one another. His hands shook, and she was steady as a rock. Well, he knew her. He knew that would make her unsteady and shake. He knew what would make her unsteady and shake. Jack moved in close. To her credit, she stood her ground, not giving up an inch. But Jack saw the nervousness in her eyes when she had to look up at him. He was much bigger than her. He knew grown men who were intimidated by his size, the muscular breadth of his shoulders. He almost felt bad when he saw her hand tremble when she adjusted it on the weapon. Almost, but not quite. He couldn't allow her to put herself in harm's way in his city and on his watch, especially not for a fucking serial killer. He moved to take her wrist. Before he could take a hold, she moved, had his wrist. Quickly, he countered, putting her in a restraining hold, but not hurting her. She slipped easily out and countered with a strike with her elbow. Jack blocked and swung and found he was blocked. Again and again, he tried to move and found himself blocked, or that she was able to break his restraining hold. Very quickly, Jack knew Caitlin was very well trained, and not just in defensive tactics. She had successfully employed several different martial art moves on him, expertly executed. She moved so swift and agile, it was hard to get a hold of her. And her strikes were fast and hard. She hadn't used any below-the-belt moves, and some of her other moves were just as effective. Her main advantage, hands down, was the element of surprise. No one, including him, expected such power and strength from such a small frame. By the time her opponent realized she was a lot more to contend with, it would be too late and Caitlin would be the victor. Jack admitted she was fast, but although she had power, it was nowhere near his. He didn't want to hurt her and was willing and was pulling some of his strength. Realizing he wasn't going to win this way, he stopped holding back. So she felt the change in him and tried to adjust her moves. As she was coming out of yet another one of his holds, he grabbed her upper arms with brute strength and forced her back with great speed, not giving her a chance to orient. He pushed her down onto the conference table. She almost got up and away, but he put both her wrists in one of his and pushed her down against the table again, forcing her to lay back with the weight of his upper body. He grabbed her upper thigh with his free hand and pulled her towards the edge of the table, using his thighs to part her legs so he could stand between hers. Ugh. She tried to pull her wrist from his grasp and kicked out as he stood between her legs. Why can't I have a hunk of a gorgeous man? I'd love to do me that way. She lay beneath him, breathing heavily, hair wild, eyes flashing brown daggers at him. Chief Guard, get off me right now. She didn't shout, but her voice carried a threat. Jack, also breathing heavy, his chest against her breast, put his free hand at her waist and started to untuck her shirt from her pants. Or what, Agent Light? Her FBI facade started to crumble. Lips trembling and tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Get off me." Jack looked deeply in her eyes. She had almost sounded like the sweet Caitlin he once knew, but he made himself ignore his response to her plea. He needed to prove she couldn't handle going up against a crazed killer who was killing people who just happened to look like her. Is that all you got, Agent? Think that will work with the killer? Maybe add a please? She gave a frustrated shout and renewed her strength. Jack held her wrist. The more she struggled, the tighter his hold. Jack knew she was getting angry. He smiled, hoping she would forgive him later after she gave up this crazy undercover idea. He teased, "Oh yes, move just like that, babe. It's turning me on. FYI, that is not my gun, and I am very happy to see you." Her eyes widened at his teasing remark. She went still, and their eyes connected. Her eyes went half-mast when she felt his erection against her. Of its own violation, his free hand went to her face, his fingers stroked her cheek. My God, Caitlin, you are still so beautiful. You've barely aged. You really could pass for 20 something. But not in his city. She turned her face away. He brought it back gently. These deep brown eyes I used to drown in, this ridiculously long, thick eyelashes. And heaven help me, these lips and this mouth. His finger lightly stroked each of her attributes as he mentioned them. His finger glided slowly back and forth across her bottom lip before tracing over and over, both over and over. This mouth and these lips used to drive me crazy, especially after I got a taste of them. So perfectly shaped, bow top lip, full bottom lip. He moaned and lowered his mouth to hers. He just barely touched his mouth to hers and then pulled it back. He waited to see her reaction. When she relaxed completely and her eyes fluttered closed, Jack moaned again and took her mouth in a real kiss. He rubbed their lips together, building that old familiar heat. It ignited. He slid the tip of his tongue across the seam of her lips. She gasped and opened for him. Jack shot his tongue home, and it did feel like coming home. He tasted her like a starving man. When she greedily tasted him back and groaned, Jack's cock pushed against his fly. Caitlin moved her leg, positioning it against his erection and rubbing it with her thigh, easing some of his ache. Jack quickly opened the buttons on her t-shirt and pulled one side open, exposing on her shirt and pulled one side open, exposing her lace bra. He made quick work of the front fastener. His desire to see how she had changed was the only thing that could have ended their kiss for him. Her breasts were even bigger, but still sexily shaped and wonderfully up tilted. Her nipples, unlike mine, Different story, yeah. But they were still responsive. No, her nipples were larger and seemed darker than he remembered, but they were still so responsive. He watched in amazement as the nipple grew hard and pebbled at his teasing manipulation. Caitlin's back arched off the table. Her sexy size had him grinding his dick insistently against her leg as he took the nipple in his mouth, sucking hard in time with his thrust against her. Caitlin moaned, Jack, Jack. Oh, Jack. Gone was the formal address of Chief in that dead tone. Jack? Her voice had a question. Reluctantly, he left the feast of her breast. He lifted and looked into her face. Yes, kitten, he whispered. She gave him an angelic smile. Jack smiled back. His world exploded in pain. Her forehead rammed into his nose. Bright light flashed behind his eyelids. Releasing her wrist, he grabbed his nose, but before he could fully register the pain, she followed with a well-placed knee to his balls, aimed for maximum effect. The dual pain sent him reeling. Way to go, Caitlin. Caitlin jumped off the table and snatched his hand from the protective cup he had formed around his sack. She bit his wrist back, twisting his arm until he went on his stomach. Keeping his arm hyperextended, she planted her foot in the small of his back and spoke in a furious voice. If you ever pull that macho BS on me again, I will do more than bust your balls. She twisted his arm harder. He gave a shout of pain. And if you ever touch me in that manner again when I'm not willing, I will take your badge and throw your ass in prison. Got it, Chief? When he didn't answer right away, she twisted his arm again. Through clenched teeth, he said, Got it, Agent. From his position on the floor, Jack heard Caitlin slam out of the conference room. He slowly stood, and as the hot pain ebbed, one thought went through his head. Would there ever be a time when Caitlin was willing? Chapter 4. Yeah, I'm only going to get through chapter 4, I think. Caitlin rushed into the ladies' room. She was shaking so fiercely she could barely fix her clothes. She looked at herself in the tri-mirror above the row of sinks. Gosh, she looked like someone who had been ravaged, well loved. It took 2 tries to re-snap her bra. Her fingers felt like clumsy shaking sticks. She rebuttoned her blouse, tucking it neatly in her dress pants. She fixed her weapon holstered clip, straightened her badge and phone that had gone askew. With trembling hands, she brushed the front of her shirt, trying to rid the worst of the wrinkles. Then she put her attention to her hair. It flew in all directions. Her part no longer distinguishable, bangs standing on end. The door opened and Tasha walked in. Silently, she handed Caitlin a brush, comb, hair sheen spray, and lip gloss. The gloss is new. You can keep it. She remembered Caitlin hated lipstick. Caitlin took the items and lined them up on the counter. She washed and rinsed her hands, cupped her hands, and splashed water on her face. Tasha handed her some paper towels so she wouldn't drip on her blouse. Caitlin pat-dried her face. She wet her hands again, using the excess water on her hair, running her fingers through her hair until it was damp. Then she used first the comb, sheen, and then the brush. Last but not least, she opened the gloss and applied one coat. Jack had kissed off the first coat she had put on this morning. Tasha didn't say a single word. Caitlin checked her restored appearance, nice and neat, very professional looking. Caitlin returned the items to Tasha. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Oh, no. I know you are not going to try that official shit with me. Tasha set her items back on the counter. I don't believe you even coming out of your face like that. No wonder. I don't believe you even coming out of your face like that. No wonder Jack lost it. Caitlin turned towards the door. I don't know what you mean. Bullshit. Caitlin swung back around, squaring off with Tasha. You know exactly exactly what I'm talking about. Jack and I were your friends, your best friends. We deserve better than you treated us. Jack went out of his mind, so nuts with worry for you, he up and enlisted. I'm sure Sarah consoled him very nicely. Caitlin smirked. Girl, that lasted about 2 months. Tasha waved her hand, showing his insignificance. After graduation, he just had to get away. He eventually ended up in Desert Storm. Before graduation, he used to come over almost every day. We still did movie nights until he shipped out. Why are you telling me this? 'Cause, wench, you should have called us. Ignoring Tasha's scolding, Caitlin frowned. Did he tell you what he and Sarah did to me at the hospital? You mean tell the cop you were mistaken about JT being the one to hurt you? Yes, he did. I was not mistaken. JT Dark raped me. Sarah Dawson and Jack Guard covered it up for him. Tasha gave her a compassionate look, putting her hand on Caitlin's shoulder. Kitty Cat, you were always messed up and super emotional when it came to JT. She hurriedly continued when she saw Caitlin about to erupt. I am not saying it wasn't justified, just saying he was an evil bastard and he affected you badly. Your very own personal boogeyman. I was never mistaken in my ID of the person who attacked me. My so-called best friend defended my attacker over me, Caitlin nearly shouted. Jack would never do something like that, especially not to you. He loved you. At Caitlin's look of disbelief, Tasha nodded. Why do you think he enlisted? The pain he caused you was tearing him apart. Caitlin didn't need to hear how heartbroken Jack had been. Her heart had shattered that long ago day in the hospital. If he had felt anything for me, he never would have lied to protect a piece of scum like Dark. Jack didn't lie. Tasha was very quick to defend. Oh, so what you're saying is that I was the one lying? Tasha paused, considering. No, sweetie, not lying, but confused. When Caitlin remained silent, Tasha pushed on. Jack is an honorable man, one of the few I've ever met, and his respect for women knows no bounds. He stands by the women in his life and would defend them to the death. Caitlin crossed her arms, totally unimpressed. Seeing her cold look, Tasha went on. I wish Jack wasn't so honorable, because if he wasn't, he would have fucked you way back when you fucked you right. And then your time wouldn't have been so horrible and you wouldn't have been such a cold bitch right now. Tasha looked her up and down with scathing contempt and then walked out of the bathroom, her head held high. Caitlin uncrossed her arms, clenching her fist at her sides. She was not a cold bitch. Jack's touch had left her feeling very hot, enough so that she had allowed him to nearly make love to her on a tabletop in a police station. She had been flabbergasted when her body had actually responded to Jack's kisses and caresses. It was because of the surprise that she had allowed Jack to continue touching her. In 25 years, her body had never reacted to any man. Well, except for that one celebrity from that one show. Caitlin never understood why just the image of that star on the screen stirred her, but it did. However, Jack was the only flesh and blood, real-life man to affect her. It was as if her body had been in dormant stage, and then Jack touched her, and it awoke. Her body had come alive, just as it had all those years ago when he'd given her a first kiss, first hug, first makeout session, and her first sexual release. It was the one and only time she had come by the touch of a man. These days, she used her trusty vibrator while images of the sexy celebrity doing equally sexy things to her body floated around in her head. Whew! The rape had left her damaged. She couldn't bring herself to be intimate with any man. She had truly tried over the years, but no man had been able to break through her wall of fear and revulsion of being touched. It had taken several months to heal physically from the rape, and she had had 3 years of therapy until she couldn't take it anymore. She found physical exertion helped her with emotional pain. She had turned to all things physically exhausting: jogging, running, climbing, martial arts, training. It all satisfied a deep need to control her body, and it all worked to keep her in balance, controlled. That was until she met Jack Guard again. Her body had recognized its owner. That was what it had felt like, as if Jack owned a part of her. Caitlin refused to believe Jack Guard was the only man who could steer her passion. It was ludicrous. Taking deep breaths to soothe the turmoil in her mind, Caitlin opened the door and headed back to the conference room. It was silly for her to be upset about something so normal. For 25 years, she strove to be normal, just like any other gal. So there was no need for her to get all crazy over the fact that she found an absolutely GQ gorgeous guy built like the Terminator with bedroom sexy green eyes, sexually exciting. No big deal at all. What were you thinking, Jack? Tasha was doing her mother hen act now, removing the ice pack held against Jack's nose, tilting his chin as she inspected the damage. You could get into real trouble messing with the FBI. Jack put his face in his hands, then ran his fingers through his hair in frustration. I know, I'm such an idiot. But I saw Caitlin and my mind went bye-bye, and my hormones said hello. Boy, you better put that trophy-sized piece of meat between your legs on lockdown before you gets locked up, Tasha warned. Again, with the blushing, Jack gritted his teeth. Tasha, really, must you? Huh. It seems I must. You have 2 FBI agents kicking your ass right now if I didn't get in it. You'd have 2 FBI agents kicking your ass right now if I didn't get in it. I know. I'm so sorry. Jack looked at Tasha with her hands on her hips, still in lecture mode. Where are they? The guys went to their car to get their tablets. I sent the info on the case to their IP addresses. Caitlin is in the ladies' room. Tasha quirked an eyebrow at him. What'd you do to her? She looked like she had a real good romp. Jack bowed his head in shame, swearing under his breath, and then aloud, Damn it, Tasha, I am such an idiot. Caitlin is a rape survivor, and I practically raped her on the conference table. What? Seeing his shameful and worried expression, Tasha went to the fridge in the corner of the room, took out bottled water, opened it, and handed it to him. Here, drink this. I am sure you are exaggerating. Jack took the bottle and stared at the blue label, thinking how Caitlin had responded and participated in their kisses. She had given him as good as she got. Well, maybe a little, but I still was way out of line. Glad you realize it, Caitlin spoke from the doorway. Jack stood as Caitlin walked further into the room. Tasha, would you please excuse us for another moment? Tasha gave them both a look, then said to Jack in a stage whisper, Keep away from the conference table. I have my lunch there sometimes. Tasha, Jack warned. I'm a-going. With those words, she left the room, making a showy gesture of locking the door before closing it quietly. Sorry, she can be a bit in your face, but I promise she's harmless, Jack said, then continued with curiosity. But you know that about her. He waited to see if Caitlin would respond to the personal note or ignore it as she had done his offered hand earlier. Yes, I do recall that about her. Sighing in relief, Jack indicated one of the chairs. Please sit. I'd like to apologize for my behavior. Caitlin paused for only a few seconds before seating herself. Jack nervously sat next to her. Caitlin, Agent Light. Given a sigh, she interrupted with impatience. Caitlin is fine. Jack smiled. Thank you, Caitlin. She nodded for him to continue. Go ahead, Caitlin. I am so sorry. I wasn't thinking. I just wanted you to reconsider this undercover thing. And in my own Alabat bullheaded way, I wanted you to see how dangerous this could be for you. My job is dangerous, Chief Guard. Caitlin said as though she were talking to a dim-witted child. I know, but it's just an old habit wanting to protect women. It was pure reaction on my part, no thought process to speak of. Tasha calls it my alpha male complex warp factor 5. I'd say more like factor 10, Caitlin smirked. Jack laughed. You are right. But then I kissed you and I totally forgot what we were even in the why we were even in that position. I only knew I wanted you. Caitlin watched him beneath her eyelashes. Jack held his breath, waiting for a response. Apology accepted, Chief Guard. Let's forget it. Jack had one more thing on his mind. He gently touched her hand. Caitlin, I am truly sorry if anything I did caused you pain or brought up bad memories. I'd cut off my hand before wanting to expose you to that, and I'd want to die if anything I did reminded you of that day. God, I'm so sorry. Seeing his distress and his agitation and wanting to convey his contrition made Caitlin want to console him. His throat muscles moved as he nervously swallowed, awaiting her next words. It's okay. Nothing you did resembled my attack. I would never confuse you with my attacker. Are you sure? Because I can get someone else to work with you. Annoyed, Caitlin cut him off. Chief Guard, you were there on that table with me. I kissed you back. My nipple responded to you. But did I scare you or bring back? Again, she interrupted. Stop! It was mutual, okay? If I wanted you off me sooner, I would have taken the actions needed to get you off me, as I did. She stood and paced across to the whiteboard. Now, I'd like to change the subject. Other than showing you my wet panties, I don't know what else I can do to prove I was not reminded of my attack and ease your mind. Jack almost choked when she mentioned her panties. He looked at her standing there with her hands on her hips, looking impatient and very much in control. She wasn't hurt emotionally or physically by their encounter. Jack was very happy. Teasingly, he asked, Wet panties, huh? Jack! She warned with flashing brown eyes. Satisfied she had used his first name, he laughed. Okay. Bringing it down to warp factor 1. Thank you. Now Jack stopped her. Sorry, just one more thing. His tone was serious as their gaze locked. What is it? She asked with stretched patience. Caitlin, you are within your rights to report me for my behavior. Get an official reprimand on my record. Would you like the paperwork for that so it can be logged? Surprise flashed across her pretty face. She seemed to consider for several moments. Jack waited on tenterhooks. Then she shrugged. I don't believe that will be necessary, Chief Guard. Their eyes remained locked for long seconds, each probing the other. Standing, he went to her. He held out his hand and whispered, Thank you. Cater. I just changed her name. Caitlin stared at his hand for several seconds before placing hers in his to be engulfed by his warmth. Slowly they shook hands. Jack smiled, and she returned it with one of her own. Releasing her hand, Jack went to unlock the door. Tasha and Agent Sanchez walked in. Well, the furniture is still in place, so I guess it's all right if we come in now. Tasha teasingly took in her boss and her old friend. Yes, please come in and let's get started. Jack motioned to chairs around the table. When everyone was seated, Caitlin gave Tasha a look. Do you always sit in meetings regarding murder cases? Oh, no, you don't, wench. Tasha stood, putting a hand on her hip. You did not just put your hoity-toity nose in the air at me. Better in the air than other people's business, Caitlin shot back. Why, Tasha started, but Jack quickly intervened. Tasha, enough. He turned to Caitlin. Tasha takes all our notes and creates all our files. In fact, she is the one who organized all the reports regarding this case into a cohesive packet, both the hard copies here and the virtual ones she sent to your tablets. At Jack's defense, Tasha sat down and gave Caitlin a take that bitch look. Fine, whatever. Caitlin took her tablet from Sanchez, ignoring the questioning look he gave her. Shall we start with the victimology? Booyah! 856. I did good. What do you guys think? I told you this book was rocked, didn't I? It is good. Oh, but you got to go back to the beginning. You can't start where I left off. You got to go back to the beginning and find out what happened before. And it wasn't just a normal rape, girls and boys. So Cate or whoever, if your PA's on here, I don't know what's going on here, because I haven't been reading along. If you guys could post your links or prices and where it can be found, all that good stuff, that would be awesome. And yes, I love me some Tasha. Yep, I concur. So, my guys didn't tell me that was sitting funkified and making me look bleh. All right, tomorrow night, while they're getting all their information up, the model by Malik Montage. Now that I think of it, Nina, I think we have read this one before. I might need to get with Malik and see. Fancy, do you remember? You've been to every single one of these. You probably have a better memory than the rest of us. I told you guys I'm tired. Yep, I did. January 26th. So I will get with Malik and see if there's another book he wants me to read, because he does have different books. So we'll go from there. Nina, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. You may not have any teasers or anything, so I'll let you know here as soon as I find out something. Alrighty, and then Thursday night is Spectre's Wake Motorcycles by Quinn Ryder on Thursday. God, I love me some motorcycles. So if there's not anything else, anybody got anything else, I'm going to let you go. Remember to show up Saturday from 10 to 2 and visit the 1 year anniversary. Can you guys believe it's 1 year I've been doing this? 1 year. And show up and see what else going on. We got we're going to have it's going to be crazy. I've been dealing with these authors for a week now. It's going to be cray. So I got Thomas. I got like, I forgot how many I've got. I got bunches of authors that are going to be doing live interviews, Facebook Live interviews, and we're going to be asking them questions. And then I've got some that are going to be doing some written interviews that I'm going to give them a list of questions they've got to answer. Then if you've got questions you want to do, there's going to be games. There's going to be book giveaways. So let's get this going, y'all. Let's do this. So anybody got anything else? If not, I'll talk to you later, and happy reading.